The moment the alien ship crash-landed in my apartment courtyard, I already knew my life was about to get spectacularly worse. A blur of shimmering colors resolved into a figure, tall, and possibly curved in all the wrong ways for a human, and glaring at me like I owed her 1,000,000 intergalactic credits. Beside her, a tiny humanoid with sparkling eyes stared with an innocent curiosity that immediately made me question every life choice that had led to this moment. "Take me instead!" the alien woman shrieked, thrusting her hands toward me in a mix of desperation and over-the-top seduction, and I had no clue whether to call child services or start taking notes. I froze, blinking. Excuse me?" I managed, trying to sound calm while my brain scrambled to sort the cultural context. She wasn't joking. Oh no, she was definitely not joking. She jabbed her chest with a dramatic flourish, voice quivering as though I held the ultimate power to spare her daughter from the horrors of Earth parenting. My mind immediately filled with images of preschool tantrums, messy finger paints, and sugary snacks capable of turning 5-year-olds into miniature, screaming banshees. I imagined the alien mother holding a guide titled Earth Parenting for the Faint of Heart and shaking in her boots. Or whatever alien equivalent of boots she had. "I can't. I mean, she's only 5. You don't understand," she wailed, eyes sparkling in some strange telepathic flare that made the air around her shimmer. I nodded, which probably made me look like an idiot, but my instinct was to humor her. For some reason, it seemed safer than asking for her ID, background check, or sanity evaluation. My apartment suddenly felt too small, my life too ordinary, and this alien woman way too dramatic. Her desperate expression could have been a romance novel cover if the subtitle wasn't Surviving Interstellar Childcare Without Losing Your Mind. "I'm the mother, and you must, please, take me instead," she insisted, voice dipping into an absurdly sultry register that was far too intimate for a stranger begging me to babysit her kid. I couldn't tell if I should faint from fear, blush, or run screaming down the street. Adult humor collided with sheer panic as I realized her understanding of human social cues was non-existent. Every gesture, every flirtatious glance, every melodramatic groan made me question whether I was about to become a participant in some intergalactic adult comedy show I didn't audition for. Meanwhile, the 5-year-old, oblivious to the mounting tension, began humming telepathically. The hum wasn't subtle. It made the walls vibrate slightly, my keys levitate, and a half-full cup of coffee tip toward an inevitable doom. I ducked, swearing softly, because apparently floating beverages were only the beginning of the day's chaos. The alien mother gave me a look that screamed, "You're next, human." I swallowed hard, realizing that any attempt to reason with her would be futile. Earth parenting might be hard, but apparently it was absolutely terrifying from an alien perspective. "You don't understand," she said, pacing in impossible loops, her voice dripping with dramatic exaggeration. "I've raised children on Xylophar 3, where tantrums involve actual gravity storms. Here, they eat strange sticky substances, make horrid noises and—" She glanced at her daughter, who was busy telepathically rearranging my bookshelf in slow-motion chaos. "And the energy drinks, human! They are stronger than any liquor known to man, woman, or alien." I raised an eyebrow, unable to stop the nervous chuckle. "Energy drinks?" I asked. "You mean like caffeine?" She gave me a look that could have melted titanium. "Caffeine? That weekly amusing drink?" she gasped, fanning herself. "My child could become a hyperactive monster in 30 seconds. I cannot endure the horror of Earth parenting." I sighed. "Okay, look, maybe I can help." The words sounded feeble even to me, but they hung in the air, binding me to chaos. She gasped, practically tackling me in relief, and I stumbled backward, thinking maybe I should have invested in a protective exosuit for first contact babysitting scenarios. She pressed close, whispering something that sounded like interstellar flirting, and I wondered if my life had officially turned into a dark, absurd adult romance comedy where the stakes were 5-year-old tantrums and explosive alien snacks. By the time she backed away, sighing dramatically, I was already halfway to regretting any agreement. Yet a tiny, innocent voice piped up beside me. The 5-year-old grinned, levitating one of my kitchen utensils like a trophy. And I realized, this wasn't going to be normal. This was going to be hilarious, catastrophic, and very, very adult in every possible way. My apartment was quickly transformed into what could only be described as an intergalactic war zone disguised as a living space. Alien food sizzled and popped on the stove with a vengeance I didn't know kitchen appliances could handle. A single touch from the alien mother's frantic hands sent bubbling purple liquid skittering across my countertops, leaving trails of smoke that smelled vaguely of burnt rubber and strawberries. I flailed with a spatula, trying to prevent a minor explosion, but the smoke alarm had already declared victory, shrieking like a banshee with a vendetta. The alien mother glanced at me with faux annoyance, her expression dripping with exaggerated flirtation. "You humans are so clumsy! Are all your meals this explosive?" I wiped sweat from my brow, muttering, "Only when alien mothers throw themselves at me mid-burn." She tilted her head, eyes narrowing in mock seduction, and I quickly regretted the comment. She wasn't subtle, and I wasn't prepared for the adult tension that kept sizzling hotter than her alien cuisine. The 5-year-old, meanwhile, was quietly giggling, levitating my furniture with telepathy and rearranging my books into cryptic, mocking stacks. Every floating chair made me flinch, every shuffled shelf seemed to whisper a cosmic taunt, and I realized babysitting a human child would have been a vacation in comparison. "Don't just stand there!" the alien mother wailed, pointing at a pan that had decided to detach from the stove and hover midair like some deranged kitchen drone. I lunged, narrowly catching it and setting it down with a thud, which earned me a dramatic gasp and a wink that suggested she approved of my heroic human instincts. Or maybe she just enjoyed the panic I was in. Either way, I was caught in a ridiculous mix of adult frustration and flirtatious absurdity. I tried to regain some control, attempting to follow her interstellar parenting manual. Every page I turned seemed to defy logic, diagrams of children levitating, notes about their minds being entirely negotiable via telepathic argument, and warnings that chocolate-like substances could trigger temporary planetary chaos. Following instructions resulted in more disasters than success. The child telepathically threw my laundry across the room, turning my living space into an abstract art exhibit of socks, shirts, and alien gadgets I didn't recognize. "You see!" the mother exclaimed, tossing her hands skyward as if my failures were proof of human incompetence. "Earth parenting is worse than a black hole. At least on Xylophar 3, tantrums are contained in gravity bubbles." I blinked, trying to respond without making it sound like I doubted her life experience. "Yeah, gravity bubbles, got it," I muttered, ducking again as a floating coffee mug nearly hit my forehead. She leaned in closer, whispering in that same absurdly intimate tone, "You're actually not completely useless." Her eyes sparkled with some interstellar mischief that made me choke on smoke and adrenaline at the same time. I coughed, spluttering, "Thanks? I think," and she laughed, a sound that was both musical and slightly dangerous. Romance, adult tension, and chaos were all blending like an overfermented alien cocktail. I wasn't sure if I was babysitting, negotiating intergalactic flirtation, or surviving a minor apocalypse. Meanwhile, the child managed to telepathically broadcast her emotions to my neighbors. I heard snippets of shocked gasps, muffled laughter, and one very confused cat yell, all from voices beyond my walls. The alien mother sighed, putting a hand on my shoulder in a strangely comforting yet dangerously intimate gesture. "See? It's not just parenting. It's performance art. Humans would never survive this on their own." I was about to argue when the pan on the stove began to bubble violently, spewing a neon green foam that smelled vaguely of alcohol. I realized with dawning horror that Earth beverages weren't even remotely strong enough for her taste, and if she tried some of my wine, the results could be catastrophic. Before I could warn her, she grabbed a glass, sniffed it dramatically, and took a daring sip. Her eyes widened, a shiver ran through her body, and she let out a sigh that was both scandalous and hilarious. "Humans drink this casually?" she moaned, gripping my arm. "I feel dizzy and alive." I blinked, unsure if I should be scandalized, amused, or just run. By the end of the hour, the apartment looked like a battleground. The alien mother lounged near the fridge, looking like she had endured a spa treatment and a war simultaneously. The child hovered nearby, still experimenting with my telepathically untrained environment. And I, drenched in alien liquids, dodging floating kitchenware, and sweating through a mix of fear and ridiculous adult attraction, realized the babysitting adventure was just beginning. The absurdity, flirtation, and chaotic energy of interstellar parenting were only ramping up, and I had no idea whether I was the hero, the love interest, or the punchline. By the next hour, my apartment had transformed into a war zone masquerading as a domestic space. The alien mother lounged on my couch with all the dramatic flair of a queen in exile, fanning herself and sighing as though surviving the first phase of Earth parenting had been her life's greatest challenge. Her eyes glittered with equal parts mischief and flirtation, the kind that made me question whether I was negotiating childcare or auditioning for some interstellar romance novel. Meanwhile, the 5-year-old floated silently in a corner, casually telekinetic, reorganizing my furniture as though testing the limits of human patience and my sanity. I tried to follow the alien parenting manual, which I was beginning to suspect was less of a guide and more of a sadistic joke. Every instruction seemed to require a degree of skill that humans simply didn't possess: comforting tantrums with telepathy, cooking snacks that exploded if the temperature varied by a single degree, and negotiating interdimensional moral dilemmas with a child who could literally project thoughts across space. I glanced at the mother, who was leaning close enough for me to feel her interstellar perfume, somewhere between roses and molten metal, wafting over me in a haze that made breathing slightly hazardous. "Humans are interesting," she purred, draping a hand over mine in a gesture that was equal parts supportive and scandalous. "You have the potential for creativity under pressure." I choked on a sigh, unsure whether to feel flattered, terrified, or both. Her proximity made my brain short-circuit in ways I wasn't ready to analyze, but the child's hovering antics left no room for contemplation. Every floating object, every telepathic shriek, and every small, glowing explosion kept me on the brink of either panic or awe. Adult humor collided with absurd parenting, flirtation collided with danger, chaos collided with my entire sense of dignity. The mother leaned back, taking a long, exaggerated sip of some neon green liquid that bubbled ominously. "Earth liquor," she murmured, eyes widening. "Is frighteningly potent." I instinctively reached for the glass to stop her, but she waved me off with a dramatic flourish that suggested she had survived far worse, and probably enjoyed it. I swallowed nervously, wondering if my apartment would survive, if I would survive, or if my heart was just going to combust in response to her teasing. "Your methods are unconventional," she said, eyes darting toward my failed attempts to follow her manual. "But effective, in a human sort of way." I raised an eyebrow. "Effective? I think we just detonated your alien breakfast." She laughed, a sound like bells ringing underwater, that made me momentarily forget I was still dodging floating chairs. The child, sensing the rising tension, let out a miniature psychic tantrum, sending my laundry swirling into orbit like a bizarre fashion show. I ducked, muttering curses under my breath, while the mother gasped dramatically at the audacity of my failure. Her flirtation escalated with every mishap. "You handle crises oddly well," she said, brushing a stray hair from her face with the elegance of someone performing in a soap opera. "It's attractive." My brain refused to process adult compliments layered over imminent danger. I could feel my pulse spike, one part panic, one part ridiculous, undeniable heat. The child's telepathy surged, sending random thoughts and half-formed insults into my mind, part commentary, part cosmic joke, and I had to remind myself that Earth parents never signed contracts for psychic warfare. I attempted to regain some authority, picking up a hovering pan and pointing it like a weapon. "I can manage this," I declared, only for the pan to levitate out of my grip, bouncing off the ceiling with a comedic ping. The mother clutched her chest in mock horror, eyes sparkling, and I realized the flirtation wasn't going away, it was intensifying alongside the chaos. She leaned forward, whispering, "I think you might survive this, and maybe even impress me." I blinked, unsure whether to feel accomplished or utterly doomed. By the end of the hour, the apartment resembled a cross between a cooking disaster, a magic show, and a poorly planned adult playground. Alien foods bubbled in neglected pans, furniture hovered at impossible angles, and the 5-year-old giggled from atop a floating bookshelf. The mother rested languidly on the sofa, eyes half closed, clearly savoring the absurd tension she had orchestrated. And me? I was exhausted, exhilarated, and slightly scandalized, wondering if surviving the next hour meant winning her admiration, surviving a psychic assault, or just keeping my dignity intact. The chaos had peaked, flirtations simmered dangerously, and the absurdity of interstellar babysitting promised there was no turning back. Whatever happened next, I knew one thing: Earth parenting had nothing on this, and adult humor, romance, and disaster were about to collide in ways that only humans, or perhaps the very clever, could survive. The final hour hit like a cosmic punchline. My apartment, already resembling the aftermath of a minor interstellar war, became a swirl of floating chairs, spilled alien foods, and telepathic screams. The 5-year-old had discovered my blender and was broadcasting her delight into my mind, which was rapidly approaching sensory overload. I ducked as a neon-colored liquid shot past my ear, narrowly missing what was left of my laptop. The alien mother, lounging with her characteristic dramatic flair, watched me like an amused goddess, eyes glinting with equal parts flirtation and mischief. "I warned you," she said, voice dripping with irony. "Earth parenting is catastrophic. Yet somehow, you manage." I wiped sweat and alien goo from my forehead, muttering, "Manage is generous." My attempt to regain control led to a precarious balancing act, catching a floating pan in one hand, deflecting a spinning chair with the other, all while dodging psychic tantrums that were becoming increasingly personal. One thought sipped into my brain: "You smell like burnt toast and desperation." I froze, realizing it was the child's telepathy sending not only complaints but an oddly humorous critique of my adult capabilities. The alien mother laughed softly, a sultry sound that made my heart and brain simultaneously combust, and leaned close enough for me to feel her presence in a way that was absurdly intimate and slightly terrifying. "You humans have interesting solutions to crises," she murmured, brushing against my arm, while her tone remained just professional enough to be scandalous. "Your resourcefulness is appealing." I swallowed hard, trying to focus on preventing the ceiling from collapsing under a sudden psychic storm. "Appealing, right? That's great, thanks," I said, dodging yet another flying cup. Her eyes sparkled, and I knew my words were utterly useless against her combination of charm and chaos. The child, sensing the tension, ramped up her telepathy to full volume. Objects began spinning in intricate patterns, floating cups collided in slow-motion fireworks, and a loaf of alien bread ignited and floated like a neon comet. I attempted a desperate move, grabbing a pan and swinging it with as much authority as humanly possible, only for it to ricochet off the wall and land perfectly in the mother's lap. She gasped theatrically, letting out a laugh that was equal parts scandalized and delighted. "Impressive," she said, brushing crumbs off her lap. "I almost didn't see that coming. Humans, full of surprises." My pulse raced as I realized I had survived the telepathic tantrum, the airborne kitchenware, and her flirtatious commentary without falling into complete disaster. Yet the flirtation had reached a level I wasn't entirely prepared for. She leaned in closer, whispering with an absurdly sultry smile, "You might just be the hero I didn't know I needed, and the entertainment I didn't deserve." I blinked, trying to process whether I had just received a cosmic compliment, a challenge, or an invitation to further chaos. In the midst of this, I improvised like a human genius under pressure. Using a combination of reflexes, absurd luck, and sheer desperation, I corralled the floating objects, redirected the airborne liquids, and even managed to convince the child to slow the telepathy with a combination of humor and subtle reverse psychology. By the time the last floating chair clattered back onto the floor, the apartment was a disaster, but survivable. The mother's eyes glimmered with admiration, her hand brushing mine again in a gesture that sent shocks of heat straight to my brain. "You did it, human!" she said softly. You handled the chaos, and even impressed me. I sagged in relief, heart still pounding, adrenaline mingling with something decidedly more intimate. Yeah, survived, I muttered, glancing at her with a mix of exhaustion and awkward attraction. She leaned back, laughing lightly, the sound musical and slightly scandalous. The 5-year-old floated nearby, clearly pleased with the day's entertainment, while I realized I had somehow navigated interstellar babysitting, flirtation, and chaos simultaneously. She tilted her head, looking at me with mock severity. You know, she said, voice dipping into a teasing, adult register. You may have just earned your place in my stories of survival, and perhaps even in my heart. I blinked, unsure whether to feel victorious, scandalized, or completely overwhelmed. The child giggled, floating my keys into a pile as if applauding my efforts, and the alien mother pressed a playful kiss to my shoulder, whispering, Next time, maybe we start with cocktails instead of chaos. By the end, the chaos had settled, flirtation lingered in the air, and I was left with a profound appreciation for human ingenuity, survival instinct, and sheer audacity. Earth parenting, I realized, was nothing compared to surviving an alien mother, her telepathic 5-year-old, and the intoxicating mixture of flirtation, disaster, and absurd humor. I had prevailed, survived, and maybe even impressed someone who wasn't human, a small but significant triumph. And as the mother reclined with a mischievous smile, it became clear, in the grand comedy of interstellar parenting, humans weren't just participants. They were spectacular, unpredictable, and unreasonably clever.